You are told that pleasure is proof of freedom, that if you can choose, consume, and discard without consequence, you are sovereign. Yet sovereignty is not measured in options, it is measured in restraint. I speak to you not as a judge of your appetites, but as a strategist of the self. There is a silence that follows indulgence, a quiet that is not peace, but exposure. In that quiet, many feel a subtle drop, an irritability, a hollowness, a faint sadness that arrives uninvited. You call it confusion. Some call it post-coital dysphoria. I call it information. Observe yourself as you would observe a rival. During desire, your mind narrows, your senses sharpen, anticipation carries you. After climax, the chemicals recede, and with them the illusion of urgency. Dopamine falls, oxytocin disperses, the body resets. What remains is the baseline of your inner order. If that baseline is weak, the drop feels like loss. If that baseline is strong, the drop feels like rest. Many attempt to conquer this descent by repeating the ascent. Another encounter, another pursuit, another spike. They mistake frequency for freedom. But the strategist asks, what am I medicating? Boredom? Loneliness? The quiet fear that without being desired I am invisible? The high of pursuit is intoxicating because it postpones self-examination. The end of pursuit is sobering because it demands it. Society whispers that liberation means constant access. It does not tell you that constant access without internal authority breeds dependency. When your mood relies on being wanted, you have handed governance of your nervous system to strangers. You have outsourced your stability. The wave of sadness after pleasure is not necessarily a moral verdict. It is a diagnostic tool. It reveals the distance between stimulation and meaning. It exposes whether you are seeking release or reassurance. When the body is satisfied, but the mind is not anchored, emptiness follows. Do not rush to silence that emptiness. Sit with it as a ruler studies a map. It marks the territories where you lack command. The discomfort is not your enemy. It is the report from within, informing you that your inner architecture requires reinforcement. Power begins there, not in the conquest of others, but in the governance of self. Every ruler must understand the forces that move his kingdom. In your case, the kingdom is biochemical. During sex, your brain floods itself with reward and bonding signals. Dopamine promises significance. Oxytocin simulates closeness. For a moment, the world narrows to sensation and affirmation. You feel chosen. You feel alive. But chemicals are not commitments. They rise with stimulus and fall with absence. When they drop, the contrast can feel like deprivation. The greater the spike, the sharper the descent. This is not tragedy, it is physiology. Yet many interpret the descent as a personal failure. They search for another source to restore the elevation. Consider the pattern carefully. If you seek frequent encounters, ask yourself, is the act itself the objective or the anticipation of being wanted? The pursuit carries more electricity than the fulfillment. Messages, glances, negotiations, the theater of validation. When it ends, you are left not with the person, but with yourself. The mind that relies on repeated spikes becomes impatient with baseline reality. Ordinary life feels dull, silence feels heavy, solitude feels threatening. Thus begins a subtle dependency, not on a specific partner, but on the cycle of craving and reward. You begin to chase not intimacy, but intensity. Strategic realism demands that you see this clearly.
If your nervous system is trained to expect peaks, it will resent equilibrium. You will misinterpret calm as emptiness. You will confuse stability with boredom. The solution is not repression, it is recalibration. You must strengthen your baseline so that pleasure becomes an addition, not a rescue. When your internal state is steady, the chemical drop feels like a return, not a collapse. This requires discipline, not abstinence for its own sake, but awareness. Notice your mood before you seek. Are you anxious, restless, avoiding a task? If desire arises primarily in discomfort, you are using pleasure as anesthesia. A ruler who anesthetizes himself cannot govern wisely. Emotional discipline is not coldness, it is clarity. When you can tolerate your own unenhanced state, you cease to be manipulated by your cravings. You regain authorship over your impulses. That is the beginning of internal authority.
There are two hungers often confused: the hunger for release and the hunger to be recognized. The body may seek discharge. The psyche may seek acknowledgement. When these hungers are misaligned, satisfaction becomes fragmented. You may tell yourself that you desire nothing more than physical experience, that you are detached, that you are modern. Yet after the encounter, when the other person leaves and the room returns to its original shape, a subtle ache appears, not for their body, but for continuity, for meaning, for being seen beyond the act. This is what I call the intimacy gap. The body is relieved, the emotional appetite remains. Human beings are not purely biological machines. Even in societies where polygamy or open structures were normalized, encounters were embedded within ritual and recognition. There were roles, codes, and expectations. Today, encounters are often stripped of context. They occur through digital exchanges, anonymous meetings, temporary alignments. Efficient, frictionless, detached. Efficiency, however, is not nourishment. When sex becomes transactional, it may satisfy the nervous system, but starve the narrative self. You return to yourself and ask, quietly, what did this mean? If the answer is unclear, emptiness expands. The disciplined mind does not panic at this realization. It investigates. Was I seeking connection but accepting approximation? Was I hoping to feel valued but settling for attention? These are not accusations, they are strategic inquiries. Loneliness after pleasure is not weakness. It is evidence that your needs extend beyond sensation. If you ignore this, you will double down on frequency. If you confront it, you may adjust your strategy. Independence does not mean indifference. It means you choose engagements that align with your internal standards rather than your momentary cravings. It means you refuse to use strangers as mirrors for your worth. To bridge the intimacy gap, you must first be willing to acknowledge it. Many avoid this because it threatens their image of detachment. But image is a fragile ruler. Truth is a stable one. The mature individual does not chase being desired. He cultivates being grounded. Then, if connection arises, it enhances him rather than defines him. Examine carefully whether the act itself is your addiction or the chase preceding it. The chase offers novelty, uncertainty, risk. Each message received is a small victory. Each escalation confirms desirability. In the pursuit, you are the protagonist of a private drama. But all dramas conclude.
After climax, there is no more script, no more tension, no more anticipation, only stillness. In that stillness, you confront the self you postponed during pursuit. If you feel a sobering drop at that moment, it is not necessarily because the experience was wrong. It may be because the excitement masked something unresolved. The end of pursuit is the return of postponed thoughts. Many mistake this sobering effect for a need to resume the hunt. They believe the solution to post-pleasure emptiness is another beginning. But this is a loop, and loops, if unconscious, become chains. Strategic self-mastery requires pattern recognition. Notice whether your desire intensifies when you are bored, anxious, or avoiding responsibility. Notice whether satisfaction fades quickly, prompting a search for a new stimulus. If so, you are not exercising freedom, you are reacting. The disciplined individual can delay, can sit with urge without immediate discharge. This capacity alone separates the governed from the self-governing. I do not suggest denial of pleasure. I suggest elevation above compulsion. When you are capable of abstaining, indulgence becomes choice rather than escape. When you are capable of solitude, connection becomes enrichment rather than remedy. Power is subtle. It is not loud conquest. It is the ability to observe your impulse and decide whether it deserves action. In the quiet after pleasure, ask not, "Why do I feel empty?" but "What have I been avoiding?" The answer will not flatter you, but it will instruct you.
You believe your desires are entirely your own, yet much of what you feel is shaped by scripts, cultural, familial, ideological. Modern society proclaims liberation while simultaneously prescribing how liberation should look. You are told that confident individuals enjoy frequent, unattached encounters without regret. If you do not, you question yourself. But perhaps the script is not aligned with your architecture. In earlier eras, behavior was policed by tribe or religion. Transgression produced shame or guilt. Today, behavior is policed by psychology and identity narratives. Instead of sin, you are given symptom. Instead of damnation, you are given diagnosis. The scrutiny remains, only the language has changed. You internalize these labels. You monitor yourself. After sex, instead of simply feeling, you evaluate. Was that healthy? Am I avoidant? Am I compulsive? This self-surveillance fractures spontaneity and breeds anxiety. The modern paradox is this: you are freer in action, but more burdened in interpretation. Every encounter becomes a referendum on your identity. If a part of you associates random sex with misalignment, perhaps as wasted time, perhaps as self-distraction, your mind will generate discomfort as feedback. Not moral condemnation, but discordance. The act did not match your internal standard. The wise individual does not suppress this feedback to maintain a fashionable identity. He adjusts his behavior to reduce internal conflict. True independence requires freedom not only from external judgment, but from fashionable scripts. You are not obligated to embody society's image of liberation. You are obligated only to construct coherence within yourself. When you act in alignment with your values, conscious values, not inherited ones, the post-act silence becomes neutral, even peaceful. When you act against them, even subtly, your nervous system protests. Do not confuse cultural permission with personal alignment. One is external, the other is sovereign.
Loneliness is often treated as a defect, something to be escaped at any cost. But loneliness, properly interpreted, is a tutor. When you feel hollow after pleasure, you are experiencing the contrast between stimulation and substance. Stimulation is immediate, substance is cultivated. The absence of substance is exposed most clearly when stimulation ends. If you cannot endure your own company without reaching for distraction, sexual or otherwise, you have discovered a weakness in governance. The mind that cannot sit alone will always seek external anchors. This is where many panic. They interpret loneliness as proof of inadequacy. They rush toward the nearest source of affirmation. Yet affirmation borrowed is fragile. It fades with absence. Emotional discipline requires that you build companionship with yourself. This is not sentimental advice, it is strategic necessity. When you can tolerate solitude, you cease negotiating from desperation. The individual who fears being alone will accept misaligned encounters. The individual who respects solitude will be selective. Do not numb loneliness immediately. Study it. Ask what it demands. Perhaps it asks for deeper friendships, perhaps for creative work, perhaps for unresolved emotions to be faced. Whatever the answer, it is more durable than another spike of dopamine. Self-sufficiency does not mean isolation. It means your baseline worth is not contingent on being chosen tonight. When you internalize this, desire becomes cleaner. You approach others from strength, not from need. In this state, post-pleasure emptiness diminishes because you are not using the encounter to fill a void. You are sharing from surplus. Loneliness, then, is not a curse. It is an audit. It reveals whether your inner life is underdeveloped. Accept its report. Improve your infrastructure.
Internal authority is the capacity to define your standards independent of applause. It is built quietly, through consistent actions aligned with chosen principles, through the refusal to let transient emotion dictate long-term direction. Begin with observation. Track your moods before desire arises. Identify patterns without condemnation. Awareness precedes control. Then introduce restraint, not as punishment, but as training. Delay gratification occasionally. Allow urges to crest and fall without obedience. Each time you do, you strengthen sovereignty over impulse. Cultivate pursuits that expand rather than deplete you. Intellectual rigor, physical discipline, creative production. These build a stable baseline. When your life contains meaning independent of romantic or sexual validation, pleasure becomes a complement, not a cornerstone. Examine your self-talk the morning after an encounter. Is there pride, neutrality, regret? These reactions are data about alignment. Adjust accordingly. You may discover that you prefer fewer encounters with greater depth, or that casual experiences are acceptable only when entered without hidden expectations. The specific strategy matters less than the consciousness behind it. External approval is volatile currency. It inflates and collapses without warning. If your identity depends on it, you will oscillate with every interaction. Internal authority stabilizes you. It allows you to enjoy pleasure without being ruled by it, to experience connection without clinging, to walk away without collapse. This is not asceticism, it is mastery. You seek power, perhaps without naming it. Not power over others, but power over your own fluctuations. You want to feel steady, regardless of who texts back, who leaves, who desires you. Understand this: real power is not found in maximizing experiences. It is found in minimizing unconsciousness. When you act from compulsion, you are governed. When you act from clarity, you govern. The sadness after pleasure, the irritability, the emptiness, these are not verdicts of shame. They are invitations to build. They reveal where you have relied on external stimuli to regulate internal uncertainty. If you accept the invitation, you begin constructing a self that does not require constant affirmation, a self that can experience pleasure fully and release it without collapse, a self that chooses connection deliberately rather than reactively. Society will continue offering scripts. It will tell you how often you should indulge, how detached you should appear, how liberated you must be. But scripts are templates, not destinies. The most formidable individual is not the one who rejects society angrily, nor the one who obeys it blindly. It is the one who understands it, extracts what is useful, and discards what compromises inner coherence. In the end, sovereignty is psychological. It is the refusal to be unconsciously guided by chemicals, by cravings, by cultural narratives, or by the need for applause. When you know yourself, your thresholds, your vulnerabilities, your authentic desires, you no longer chase intensity to feel alive. You are alive without chasing. And that is power. To stand in the quiet after pleasure, after praise, after pursuit, and remain whole, governed from within, unmoved by the expectations of the crowd.